Non, non. ده كارتونيكو مزال. كان علي انا ماذا بيا نحطك فلوس كان علينا.
Je pense que c'est ici.
Ouais. Oui, on est bien, Yvonne.
عندك 60 سنتيمتر ديجا دوتور.
صافا هكا. بالنسبة للصوت صافا يعني الصوت نتكلم مني معناتها مش كل شكل من بعيد.
ليه بفلويت ليه وبارلور كل شيء اسمع. هذا مغازة تعملوا لي من سالك انت ما راح نجيك Bonjour, Tahwel, vous allez bien? Ça me fait vraiment plaisir, ça me flatte.
doucement على خاطر البيتزا دائما نحاول ما نفوتش على الكلام.
Mesdames et messieurs, merci de prendre place. Nous allons démarrer, s'il vous plaît. Merci.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We are about to start.
Bonjour, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis ravi et honoré d'être des vôtres en cette matinée, en ce démarrage du Congrès international relatif et inhérent à la formation.
We welcome you to this international conference on the performance, the improvement of performance in the public sector. We would like to express our gratitude for all of those who took the trouble to show up to this event. 3 days will comprise a lot of interactions, roundtables, discussions in order to come back to the change, evolution, adaptation. These are recurrent keywords that will be that are totally inconsistent with the inertia and the status quo. Administration is like cycling. If you don't evolve, if you don't move forward, we are going to be lagging behind and paddling back. And therefore, this is the starting point. The starting point for today that will trigger training as a major point, as a major event. We will discuss all of these aspects. We will also get into the bottom of these aspects of benchmarkings. There will be presentations and interactions. The final objective is to have a final blank book that will contain the recommendations and the teachings, thanks to the joint efforts, thanks to the contribution of each other. The main objective is to really eliminate inertia, to reach excellence and transparency, the evaluation of competency, and that is a major challenge. 3 days of proceedings where we will highlight the good practices, virtuous practices, because even in-house the stakes are high to create this productive, virtuous ecosystem and set up this know-how in order to reach efficiency, impact and added value, and then to ensure sustainability. So we will be comparing the different training systems to examine the different models in place and to come across the different methodologies and to look at the correlation between training, the values of the sector, and by focusing on the different experiences and focusing on qualifying and diploma trainings. I'd like to thank you for all the energy that you will deploy and for your commitment. I'd like to really applaud the translation team, the technical team, all those who have supported us and to enable us to work in optimal conditions and to reach the expected results from these 3 days proceedings. These 3 days will be exhaustive, and the plenary will end at the end of this morning session. Before we start on different workshops in the afternoon, in terms of methodologies and know-hows, you will be split up into 3 rooms. There will be a focus on a given topic, and then we will come back for the reporting. So time management is of the essence. The efficiency, the targeting aspects will be highly recommended. Once again, I thank you. I'd like to thank our guests and our project managers, Mrs. Fadila Dridi, the head of the Department of Public Service in Tunisia. Mrs. Dridi, please join us for the opening speech. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The representative of the German embassy, the GZ project manager, dear international and national participants, it is with great honor and immense pleasure that I address you in this opening speech for this international congress on the theme training and the improvement of public service. within the framework of our project for the modernization of the public civil service in partnership with GIZ, and that targets the reform of our training system and individual evaluation of public departments in order to have more qualified staff members, highly motivated, and for an efficient administration to serve the citizens. This project comes within the framework of an overall strategy for the modernization of the public department and public service. Since 2017, several projects are in the pipeline, including the in-depth review of the general bylaws of the public service, the renewal of our human resources methodologies, the modernization of our information and ICT system. And it is within this framework that this project of modernization and the training and the evaluation of the public staff members. The different projects are set around the improvement and the development of certain aspects of human resources, the evaluation of performance, and the training of our civil staff members. The two major objectives to be reached in this project to develop an individual evaluation system of our staff members based on objective and equitable and transparent criteria, with the system of the recognition of competency and performance. We need also to have a good approach of quality with regard to training, and for the institutions providing for the training at the level of content and the level of the stakeholders involved of this training, those who are training the trainers. These four keys are expected. Four key results are expected: the national and international certification of the training structures within a progressive and evolving approach, the qualification and certification of the competency of human resources intervening in the field of training, like the trainers, the auditors, those in charge of training, who will be the guarantors of any process of training. The modernization of tools and training methodologies that would allow the improvement of these competencies. The different activities scheduled within this project are and will be conducted within a participatory approach, inclusive approach, consistent with the training, the context of our training institutions and their ability to subscribe to this process with the commitment of the stakeholders, stressing the coaching and communication activities to ensure a better accomplishment of this change. This Congress stands as an opportunity for everyone to really roll up our sleeves and to discuss the different topics with the attendance of many international and national experts who will provide us with their experiences and good practices in the field of training, with the important participation of the representatives of all the departments, the regional and local departments of the ministries that will actively contribute to the different panels and activities staged in these 3 days seminar. I'd like to thank GIZ for the quality of the cooperation with Tunisia, and particularly with the presidency of the government and all the ministries and the departments that are direct partners to this project. My thanks go out equally to the international actors from the different countries that honored us with their presence in this seminar, and as well as all the participants who've attended this meeting and those who are following us online. My thanks go out also to those who have contributed to the organization of this event. So I wish everyone very warm welcome and fruitful proceedings to these 3-day activities in order to reach at the end of this seminar to come up with fruitful recommendations that will from which we can draw inspiration to develop our new system of training. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Fadila Dridi. Thank you to have presented the different key steps to come up with these results. As previously mentioned, this project the success of this project goes through the great cooperation between the Tunisian state, the international cooperation, and like to invite Mr. Fritz Jung, the representative of the German embassy in Tunisia.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Dear Mrs. Fadila Dridi and all the representatives of the head of government and all the ministries participating with us, dear Monsieur Potier and all the other experts and lecturers participating in this Congress, dear Yasmin and all the colleagues from GDZ, dear ladies and gentlemen, we are here in a very nice room, and I'm impressed by your presence in such a big number, and it's an honor to participate to the opening of this conference and address convey the message on behalf of the German embassy and the cooperation institutions. It is a Tunisian conference and within the project of support of the improvement and development of civil servants in Tunisia. It is also an international conference which has mobilized an impressive number of people to discuss about the improvement and of the performance of civil servants in Tunisia. And I would like to express my thanks to the international participants and enrich the discussion with the expertise and their experience, and who will transform the cooperation between the head of government and the GDZ. And it's a great opportunity to create a benchmarking around the reforms in the pipeline and the scheduled projects and the possible projects. The German cooperation is investing in this project for the modernization of civil servants within the framework of our cooperation and partnership between Germany and Tunisia. It is a new approach. It's the line to focus on the priority areas for our partners. We have targeted resources and to work with structuring planning. As the reforms are developed, we can contribute even more on the basis of our common values, democracy, the rule of law, and democracy and human rights, and the cooperation with the international institutions, the International Development Bank in Germany for the performance and the management of public finance, and to set up a common matrix for the reform of the Tunisian government. The reforms of this matrix have been designed by the Tunisian government and will be indicators for the money lenders, and one of the reforms with the GDZ is the reform of public service. Not only with the funding of the reform, but also we have technical assistance with the GDZ to contribute effectively in the implementation of these reforms. And I I commend the political will of the government to implement this project for the evaluation and improvement of civil service in Tunisia. For Germany and the Development Agency, it's an honor to accompany you. The Republic of Tunisia is at the turning point of its history, and the government has launched many projects and without establishing a hierarchy between those projects, the management of human resources is a guarantee and an access to performance, modernization, and the participation of citizens. German cooperation aims at improving the methods of this reform and the development of the public service. Among the state agencies, we have the agency of under the tutorship of the government, and it is the spinal cord of the civil servants. It has a fundamental role in the present period in which the state is facing many difficulties with very little leeway. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing the change in the paradigms of management of public service and civil servants, and we are called upon to cooperate, and thank you very much for your commitment in order to develop the potential of the civil service through training structures which are extremely good and have nothing to envy to other international agencies. Thank you. Not to forget the working and the effective projects and actions for an efficient and modern service in the service of the citizens, and I wish you full success for your conference. Thank you very much. You were speaking a moment ago about the spinal cord of the reforms, because inevitably for the implementation it has to go through an administration which has an impact and which is efficient, and this is an inevitable prerequisite. And now I would like to give the floor to the head of the projects in Tunisia.
Bonjour.
Good morning once again. I represent the head of the government, Mrs. Labidi, Mr. Poitier, dear colleagues from GDZ, the directors of the training centers, welcome, and those in charge of human resources. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and a privilege to address you today, to convey our welcome on this international congress on the theme of the performance and the improvement of civil service. It is at the heart of our preoccupation within the framework of our projects for the support of the modernization of assessment of public service. It is in the public schools that the spinal cord of the civil service in Tunisia are trained, and this is why I would like to commend the work of the different the responsible for the training centers, and it is an opportunity to exchange with the colleagues from other countries, and we are proud to welcome experts from Palestine, Morocco, Bahrain, Lebanon, Finland, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, and we are very proud to give the floor to our Tunisian partners who are engaged in the reform process and who are sharing with us their experience, their field experience. I would like to highlight the major role of training, and it consists in training the agents of the civil servants, and constitutes a structuring stage for the civil service preparing for their future job. And it doesn't have to meet today's challenges, but also future challenges, and call upon new training methods, new digital technologies, which will help build up tomorrow's civil servants, because this is the role of the future civil servants, who are aware of their tasks in the service of the state and of the citizens. And it is why it is important to establish a link between the initial training and continuous training throughout the career, because it is this kind of training which needs to be improved in order to take into account the new needs expressed by the public employees, particularly within the framework of institutionalizing training, and in order to anchor this spirit in the civil service. And allow me to dwell upon a topic a bit longer. One of the objectives of our project is to open access to information as largely as possible, to open to everyone, to everyone in a equitable, in a fair and transparent way, so as no one will feel excluded. I insist on that because the reality shows that the challenges of access to information is a major obstacle for women, particularly between the private and the professionals and other groups where access to information is made difficult because of structural disadvantages. This is a right which hasn't been acquired yet, and it is important for the fight for professional equality. I hope that this topic will be raised in the round table of this Congress, and I'm curious to know the results. And the civil servants need to take to bear in mind the service to the citizens, and what is more important, the new methods of the management of civil service. They are not in harmony with the demands of the citizens, and to study the managerial techniques is a key issue for the improvement of the performance of civil servants, and you would like to take advantage of the experience of the experts. Before concluding, I would like to thank our cooperation partners who have enriched this Congress with their commitment in consortium with the GRS, with UNFA France, and the Kiel Higher Studies School in Germany. And I'm sure that your exchange will be fruitful with our experts from abroad and from Tunisia. Thank you for your attention.
Merci.
We would like to thank the team that has been involved in the project for the support of the training system in the public sector in Tunisia. Now we will listen to we will outline the methodology of this project and measure the breakthroughs. It will be done through two parts, through Mrs. Lubna Zorlami, and we start with Mrs. Zorlami, the Director General of the public sector in the Prime Ministry, the introduction of the system of certification for the training institutions. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Please get closer to the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Allow me, first of all, to welcome Mr. Fritz and Mrs. Yasmin Fashlet, Monsieur Vincent Pladier, Mrs. Fadila, the head of the General Committee of the Public Sector, and then dear experts, dear guests. I'd like to present the component number one for the introduction of a system of certification for the training systems. I will share with you our vision. First, the reason behind this component is to set we started from a finding that the training system has some shortcomings that do not enable us to meet the expectations of public civil servants, like the standardization of the training for the public officials and public servants, the studies on the impact of training, the predefined criteria for the selection of the participants to the trainings, and the objective criteria for the selection of the trainers in the public sector. All of these elements make the training of the public servants ensured by the center and inconsistent with the requirements of the administration based on efficiency and performance. Therefore, we shared with our partners our vision that consists in setting up a training system that is certifying and that is qualifying, that would enable the public servants to get scaled up. The objective of this component of this training is the insurance of quality assurance in the training provided to the public servants by improving the quality of the training provided by the training institutions through the modernization of the content of training and the approach and the tools used, and finally the professionalization of human resources. The main axes of this component are as follows: the national and international certification of public training entities. Second, the qualification and certification of the competencies of human resource. Third, the modernization of the training modules. And third, the establishment of a national platform for the management of training and for the breakthroughs. I'm going to hand the floor to my colleague. Good morning, everyone. Dear Mrs. Yasmin and dear Mr. Poitier, dear all, thank you for attending today. With regards to what Lubna Soneni has presented, I will now focus on the breakthroughs of the component of training and certification since the start of our project. As previously mentioned by Mrs. Lumna, we are working on the aspect of certification at the national and international levels of the public training entities. With regards to national certification, we have an ultimate objective, which is the establishment of national assurance quality standards. So far, we have succeeded in achieving two stages. First, the drafting of the first project of this standard, and to do so we have set up a technical committee that is represented by the members of the network of the public training entities, and then we are now in the testing phase that will focus on the testing of this draft version, mainly with three pilot sites: the National Training and Center under the Ministry of Education, the National Center for Training for the Health Executive Staff, and the General Department of Planning for Cooperation and Training of Executive Staff within the Ministry of Equipment. With regards to the international certification, after consultation with the different partners, we have decided to focus on ISO 2021 standards regarding quality, which is established for the higher education institutions. And at this level, we managed to make the diagnosis of the gaps, and we are now setting up the remedial work initiatives that will be ushered by the international certification. And we have the National Administration School of Tunis, the Training and Decentralization Support Center, and the National Finance School. Before I move on to the national platform for training management and to ensure this national and international certification, we have identified within each pilot institution a quality official, and we set up a quality task force tasked with the establishment of quality approach for the standards or for the international certification. I'd like to seize this opportunity to thank the technical committee that drafted the standard version and the head of each pilot establishment for the standards and the international standardization and standards, and the task force. And the last part of the component is to set up a national platform for the training management. The objective behind this platform is to first ensure access to training, and through the digitized catalogs to ensure a monitoring for the implementation of the annual plan of the training. I'd like to explain the objective of this international congress. We wanted to deal with the link between the improvement of the quality of training provided to the public servants, and then to check the impact of a good training on the performance of the public servants, with an ultimate objective of ensuring a good quality of service performance for the citizens and a good delivery of services. And we are now focusing on quality now. That is why we wanted to involve in this Congress all of the training officials and the officials in the human resources at the central level and the decentralized levels, involving also the universities, the civil society, the trade unions, and the students of some training centers, like the students of the higher education of ENA school, with a view to providing exchange with regards to expertise and national experience in Tunisia, and with regard to the international expertise from different countries. I'd like to thank you once again for attending, and I wish you fruitful proceedings. Thank you. Thank you once again. Thank you, Mrs. Gurati. I'd like to thank Mrs. Dridi, Mr. Young, Ms. Fizland, and Mrs. Orlam. I thank you for proceeding to the opening of this Congress. I'd like to really invite you to focus on the presentation that will be presented by Mr. Vincent Petit. You are an expert in public governance and professional competence, and former manager of the public sector. And we will talk of training at the heart of a modern public sector. I hand over to you. The speech will be given to the room in order to ask their questions.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, in particular, to those I met about 10 years ago in Tunisia with some of your training schools and some administration authorities. And on the basis of all that has been, that has come up in the different jobs, whether with the government or public institutions, in order to think together on those issues, fundamental issues, which result in interesting programs which have been very rapidly presented to us. And this reflection, the thinking we will have together, I wish that it will inspire every one of you that in relation to your responsibilities, the place where you are, what is said, what has been said, which is being said, which will be said, in these 3 days so that you are able to see what is in relation with your concerns, or if it is a new idea. So this reflection, this thinking aloud will be elaborated around what is essential, according to me, and to the landmarks and how things evolve at the level of your country. I will give a few references. It's not a model. It's the model of Tunisia, that Tunisia is in the process of building up. We are having a comparative approach, my own experience in France, and also at the level, at the international level. I have worked a lot on the issue of how to tackle civil service at the international level through various institutions and entities, and at present I'm an international expert posted in Morocco for the European Union. The central issue is to know what are the links which exist between a certain number of objectives which are fundamental when we believe in public action, when we have a certain idea of civil service, is to know whether the administration, how can it become even more performing, even more efficient, how it could have more results, it could have a better quality. This is an objective which is present with all of us, but civil service, when we go beyond all caricatures, and if we believe in this mission, this civil service, what relationship does it have with the objective? What is the renovation peculiar to civil servants, which will allow the improvement of the quality of the administration? And the issue of vocational training, what is the place it holds in relation to this essential issue of the landmark as an inspiring source, a source of inspiration, which will be taken up in all the workshops, the round tables of this conference. The landmark which I suggest and which you'll find in the white book evolves around these 10 topics which have a logical links between them and which deal with a certain idea of civil service, a certain idea of human resources, and a certain idea of training and of learning. It is these dimensions which are different and which may be dealt with separately, and I would like to show the overall logic, the deep interactions, and the mechanisms on which we need to take very careful. We should take every landmark which requires special attention and which echoes many things which have already engaged at the level of Tunisia. Madame Fadila Dridi and Jasmine Friedlach are a testimony of that. The first landmark, it is a question: what creates a good quality of civil service? You could speak about performing civil servants, so I will use the terms which will kindle thinking. It's a certain number of things, among other things, but the issue of the meaning of civil service, of the governance of civil service, the expected results, what we could call the balance management, that is to say, the financial regulations, things you shouldn't do when you are a civil servant, and the management of quality, what we talked about a moment ago, and which holds an interesting place and which creates a good quality civil service. And then you have the competencies there on the right, which cannot be developed only if we have landmarks on the meaning, governance, balanced management, expected results. And it is this interaction that I would like to highlight. When we speak about sense or meaning, I need to make things more accurate. I'm particularly interested in this topic. What creates meanings, it is values. You are a republic with a constitution. The source of fundamental values are the values of civil service. You have a certain idea of civil service and also of the social demands like sustainable development, the climate change. Then you have the principles, deontological principles on the behavior and on the landmarks, and the demands of society. All this creates meaning. Then what we call governance, it is at once a strategy, if it exists. If it doesn't exist, it's difficult to have training. The issue of management, what place does it hold, which has been overvalued for a certain number of years. It deals with the steering of the art of governments, and we need to redistribute according to my experience. When I was in charge of 800,000 civil service in France, and which did not have the political sense and the elaboration of governance. So we need to have a new balance. And then we have the issue of partnership, which is important as well. And all this constitutes government. And then the notion of competency, I take up a definition of Dieu Botter, who has defined competence in a very interesting way, which is a series of competences of how to act and interact. We cannot have a development of competencies without a clear idea of governance. So training is good, but it is better when we train within an overall framework, a well-thought environment. A second landmark, public service or civil service, it is an affirmation, a conviction, is a force of the renovation of civil service, and there I will refer you to a 2018 document of OCDE, which develops the Operation Systema. You may have heard of it, and which makes up a certain number of landmarks on the way public service is a renovating force of civil service. It is a key for the renovation of public administration, and more particularly a second report of the OCDE dating back to 2019 on the issues of leadership to civil service and which draw the contours of a high-quality civil service. So I refer you to those two reports, which leads me to a third landmark, the approach to human resources, which should not be segmented, but it should be taken in an overall global way. You have here a table of some of the components of what we may call the system of the management of human resources, which starts from the entity of civil service for the purpose of improvement, and which is an important landmark for human resources with the issue of budgetary employability, and also there is the issue of the craft, the competencies which characterize it. Then we have a need for fiche de poste, the selection of civil servants on their competencies, on their profile, in order to hold positions which are themselves defined. All this allows a provisional management of positions, and it requires professional interviews and discussions in relation to the results, and the needs for capacity building or the evolution of the profiles. So it is a strategy of development. There is a system of information for the management of human resources which deal with the so we need to have a logic and without a selection based on competencies. This is a bit difficult, hence the idea that you all know, on which I insist, and because it is a key to a real evolution, to be able to have an overall approach and not to have a segmented view, but to the totality of the system. The fourth landmark is training as a learning process in life. It is a UNESCO definition. It dates back to 2015, and it shows to us who are interested in adult civil service, there are many ways of learning, many ways of learning. You know it. You have the initial training, which exists, which do not exist, which should exist, which are necessary, which we should exist. There is training for life. There is more and more issues of accompaniment of certain agents who have the potential to value their experience. It's professionalized coaching. There is the learning community, and the training goes not only through initial training and by classical training in vocational training schools, but it also by the learning communities. That is a division in a ministry. It's a public establishment. It's a local community. It's a division in the local authority, which could allow to learn things, which completes initial training, which completes vocational training, and it is this modality of learning. These are sources of inspiration, the places of inspiration, a visit in fact to see how the issues of traffic or security issues are dealt with. It could be a moment of training, and which are inspiring and will allow us to learn things. And then you have all what we call self-trainings. Because of the digital systems allow us to do it, and we need to tackle all this in a overall and total way. Then you have training, learning is a way for capacity building, and actually it has a relationship because training allows for capacity building. It is not only it's not the capacity building of individuals. This is fundamental. It is absolutely vital. But you have capacity building mechanisms of a training school, of a system, of existing systems. There are things which are organized and which could be hampering, inappropriate, which could be reunified, and you should get interested in an institution like a social being and ask the question how it could work in a more flexible, more dynamic, more effective way, and it is a reflection on each individual, each team, on their competencies. And a third dimension of capacity building, it is the dynamism of the ecosystem. There is not only one training school, but there are other training centers outside the civil service, and which could add to the experience. It is a systemic configuration, and the three dimensions of capacity building, it is a definition dating back to 2015. The notion of a craft, of a job, is important, and it is particularly important, and it is related to what was presented a moment ago in terms of certification. So I take these as a starting point. There is a notion of work, of job, of craft, which is fundamental in order to create a feeling of identity for each individual, whatever the level of hierarchy of that individual belonging to a craft, the acknowledgement of the craft, it is very important, and everyone can see the interest of that. I thought a lot about this issue, how there are 234 different streams in civil service, and the approach is ours, and which I think works quite well. It's a total of a sum total of crafts and jobs characterized by activities which are the main activities within a craft. It is a gas plant. It is very simple, and it is a referential of activity, a specific craft, not general. And then the professional competencies, the main professional competencies, and this work of the aggregation of the different, of the repertoire of the different jobs and crafts, this will allow plenty of things. It will allow to have job profiles when we launch a recruitment, to have the link between the budgetary posts and the provisional competencies. When they are identified, they can trigger vocational training strategies, and all the provisional management of competencies is possible when all those components exist. There's a second interest, and the present project, the improvement and assessment of civil service project in Tunisia. which is the issue of the acknowledgement of competencies, the recognition of competencies, and I will insist on that. The notion of crafts and jobs is a vector of professionalization. I use the term of professional certification, which could be defined by its objective. That is to say, we try to measure and to favor the fact that someone has a command through his initial training or professional training, and this approach of professional certification can be defined by any constituting element, the element of competency. That was what I was talking about, peculiar to each craft, then in a referential of evaluation and assessment of the necessary competencies in order to attest them. And we have in France, we have the national catalogue of professional certifications, which is a data bank, private and public, and every training which needs to be certified should to fit in a referential, a total overall referential. Seventh landmark, it is the training modalities. Learning can be done through initial training, learning communities, or self-training. Now we speak about learning modalities. You know that many public service schools are well engaged in there. You know the advantages of the digital in the learning process. By learning, I think, is important, which involves the necessity to find a balance point between the digital, the distance learning, and the classical training. In presence, find the balance point in terms of volumes, in terms of modalities, pedagogical modalities.
La tentation de basculer.
Sometimes the training is most of the time in person rather than virtual. This is quite an interesting issue that could raise some issues. We have to strike a balance, and we need to have a good balancing between the in-person and the virtual, what we call the hybrid training mode. That could, of course, would help us achieve this balance. It's quite an important issue that will be rediscussed in this seminar. There's another concept that is equally important and that you are familiar with blending learning. That is the reverse pedagogy, blending learning. We can in a in-person setting with the adult learners, we can work on a virtual basis and provide teaching tools for a better awareness and acquisition of knowledge, and in-person setting we could have a floor for questions, for exercise, for ownership, and for the resolution of certain cases that are based on the work of knowledge acquisition that was not done academically with the PowerPoint, like I'm doing now without a PowerPoint, but that rests on the ownership by each one, thanks to this distance learning and through the digital support that enables us to render the virtual very interactive. We need to find the required paradigm. It stands as a challenge now for some years in Quebec. In France, we've done this. I know that you are doing this through the CIFAD that invested a lot in this field. It's a passionate topic, and I noticed that the joint training project will come up with a balanced model. There are other modes that, like the design thinking, and what we call the active methods, that is to create the situations, the resolution of practical cases, the visits of the learnings on the field. These are active methodologies that are equally important. As an eighth benchmark, training, I'm going to other dimensions, of course, in terms of the logical linkage, but to focus on the main benchmarks. There's the eighth mark I want to address. There are societal requirements, the accomplishment of the 17th Sustainable Development Objectives of the UN. There's the combating discrimination, gender equality, which is a recurrent training topic to change the behaviors and the opinions. You have the issue of literacy programs. Literacy programs is about how to know to read and write and reckon, and to have the necessary baseline competencies that would allow us to understand instructions, to use them properly, and to know there are, of course, baselines for training in the public sector that are related to the process of literacy. And it is not just a challenge of illiteracy, it is more than the effort to counter illiteracy. Vocational training is an important lever with regards to these societal requirements. We have to be aware of that. We now come to the ninth benchmark, which is that this training can become a subject of evaluation, the evaluation of the acquired competencies. We are not within a process of evaluation of the public policies. We are evaluating here, we are doing the evaluation related to the acquired competency, which is the topic of training. There are three benchmarks at this level. There are three different things that are complementary and that are expected and that are beneficial to improve training and to improve public service, and then to contribute to the quality of public service. It is the measurement of the level of satisfaction of the trainees, whether they were happy or unhappy, if need be, whether it is necessary, and therefore we have to evaluate the professional knowledge acquired, which is another level. It's another requirement. It's another stage that would allow, in addition to the level of satisfaction, whether the trainees have learned something, and then the attestation of the professional skills acquired, which is no longer an exercise between the trainee, the learner, and the trainer, but it is a triangularized exercise involving the employer, the learner, and the trainer, and which is another process that requires another way of addressing the situation. Eventually, the 10th benchmark, vocational training, with all of the dimensions already mentioned, contribute strongly to a quality public service. The question, quality public service, what is the definition that we provide for quality? The term quality is important as is addressed in the private sector. In the public sector, the public sector has a different logic from the private sector. The problem of the quality cost that needs, of course, to be addressed. The quality of training institutions, the quality of the administrations where these civil servants are operating. As previously seen, training and learning and apprenticeship is not limited to the training institutions. Training online, ongoing training is a vast domain, and therefore training institutions should not only provide good training, but keep in mind of course, the target learner community, and to generate clear benchmarks in terms of relevance and clear benchmarks in terms of the expected results, and in terms the issue of the definition of quality is important. There's the approach to quality mentioned with the specific repository for training 21001, which is an important brick to the wall. And there's the one pertaining to the quality repository of the administrations. Currently, there's a principle of quality management of the ISO 2001-2015 standard for the public institutions, but which are very much connected to the private management mode. And this raises the question whether there isn't a necessity among the public institutions in Tunisia, as in France, in Germany, other countries, to ensure that the training institutions could have their own quality repository, and where the staff are working, this quality concept be the subject to some kind of repository in tune, of course, with the different other aspects. These benchmarks, I hope, by way of introduction, is an ongoing reflection that will linger on for the 3 days. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you good proceedings and congratulations for everything already undertaken through the support for the modernization of the public service with the different departments of the public sector. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bautier, for this exhaustive preamble. Please stay with us. We will now give the floor to the room in order to ask a few questions. We will be entitled to 4 questions. We are a bit later. We'll try to comply with the schedule. I'd like to ask you to ask yourself briefly and to really ask your questions. There will be 4 questions. There will be a collective reply for Mr. Bautier. The microphone is available for those wishing to ask a question. Go ahead, please. You have been very clear, so clear that no questions are raised. So, no questions, apparently. It has been very explicit. So we thank you once again. Thank you to have highlighted this multi-dimensional aspect about the complexity of the issue. This mapping, this dashboard, and this complexity that you've addressed. That's why many aspects will be focused on during the 3 days in order to find, fruitful results. Please join your hands to thank Mr. Vincent Bautier, expert in former general of the Territorial Public Sector Department in France. I'd like to invite you for a small break, a 15-minute break. We shall reconvene with the first round table that will launch and trigger the first debate. It will pertain to the challenges that pertain to the provision of good quality training for the public servants. Please come back quickly.